Hello, and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Today I'm here with Pete Seligman, and we are going to talk about search funds. He is a search fund investor, has bought and did the search himself. He's been in the shoes of being the searcher, and now he's helping others. So I really am looking forward to this conversation. All the way from the other side of the pond, I think you're heading into summer while we're heading into winter over here. So thank you for being on here today.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I'm just waking up here as you're heading into your afternoon, and we're heading into summer. It's the weather's getting great.
I don't know what it'd be. It would be so awkward for me, like growing up in the United States, to like think that November, December, and January are summer. But it is what it is, right? It's like
Our Christmas is on the beach.
so.
Yeah,
Let's talk about your kind of how did you get into this space? Give us your origin story. What is the history of Pete?
yeah, sure. So I mean, I grew up in Sydney on the beaches here, and I had a relatively, I guess, quote unquote, normal upbringing for a Sydney boy. I studied as an engineer. I also did a finance degree, and I started my career as a civil engineer. So into the design space. So when I say that I'm an engineer, I say that I dig holes. I don't write codes, because a lot of people these days, if you say you're an engineer, they assume that you're in the tech space. But so I did that for a few years and then moved into project management. And then because I had the finance degree, I was looking for an opportunity to exploit that. And so I moved into investment banking. And so I was looking at infrastructure investments for an investment bank. So kind of that crossover between engineering. And that gave me some really good experience in kind of thinking about financial analysis, due diligence, and that kind of thing. And then, was here and in London, a bit in Tokyo, a bit in New York. So kind of a bit of global experience there. And then came home just after the credit crunch, so just out after 2008, and then joined a big property company here and spent a few years in, I guess, what I'd call kind of a normal, large corporate general management type position, and got through to kind of 2012 and realized that I could see that corporate path ahead of me, and it wasn't a bad one, but strangely, it was a bit too clear. I wanted it to be more ambiguous. And the other thing that I was keen on was it's not just the autonomy that I was after, but it was also the accountability. And when I say accountability, I mean, I wanted it to hurt when I fell over. I felt like in that big corporate environment, whether it was me or other people around me, when you made mistakes, there was enough momentum in the flywheel that it didn't really matter that much. And I wanted to be closer to the fire on that stuff. And so I hadn't heard of search or ETA or anything like that. And obviously people were buying businesses and doing all that stuff in Australia, but it wasn't a market or a community or a network. But me and a mate of mine decided, why don't we try to buy a business if that's what we want to do? Because I'm not a founder type. Like I didn't have any great new ideas I wanted to start, any, new software I wanted to develop or any product I wanted to bring to market. So I thought, well, how can I become a business owner? Well, maybe I just need to find one to buy. And so in late 2012, early 13, started looking, and by the middle of 2013, the 10th of June, 2013, completed the acquisition of my first business, which was just a small mining services business. So it does the measurement instruments on the mine sites. So measuring the material around the mine sites. Had 5 or 6 people in it, including the husband and wife owner, who left within 3 to 6 months after that. And I was left as the CEO of a business of 4 people. The good thing is that story continues. So we still own that business, and now we've got approaching 100 people, and we're in multiple locations around Australia. And so that's been a great kind of pathway for us over the last 10 years. But yeah, originally there's a lot of chat at the moment about holdcos. I guess that's what we originally did. because we bought that first one. I dropped in to run it and grow it. We then bought three more in 2015, and I kind of made myself redundant from the first one, stepped up into a board position, dropped into the second one, did the same again, then dropped into a third one. So I would kind of drop in each time into that leadership role for various periods of time to do the post-acquisition fix, do a bit of growth, either recruit or promote within to then make myself redundant, step back out again. And that was good fun, great experience, but still had all of those really hard times. I think it was probably was 2017-ish around this time of year. I remember there being a convergence of risks across multiple businesses and that impending fear of payroll checks and cash flow and all that. So I've hit that end of the spectrum as well, but we navigated through that well and got out the other side. So then 2020, completely unrelated to COVID, even though that kind of came through at about the same time. I was trying to work out what to do next. I successfully made myself redundant again. And so the obvious choice was to go and buy another business, drop in as CEO, do just rinse and repeat. But I was looking for something a bit different. I didn't want to raise a private equity fund. I didn't want to do bigger deals. I really like these size of business, but I didn't want to be the CEO. And then I came across the concept of a search fund, which, for me, so a lot of people, when they come across the concept of a search fund, they're coming to it with the lens of an entrepreneur saying, oh, this could be a great way for me to become a business owner. For me, when I came across the search fund concept, I thought that's a great way for me to be an investor because I didn't want to be hands off. I still wanted to be engaged. I love the idea of being involved with the operating business. And I guess I would also say that I enjoyed the idea, and I'm still in the middle of this, of the next phase of my own evolution or my own education is me learning how to help someone else go through that process rather than me do it myself. And that's a significant part of that role as a search investor. So yeah, fast forward to today, I've spent the last 4 years going deep on search investing. I'm backing, I think it's soon to be 12 searches, predominantly here in Australia, a bit in New Zealand, and we're just about to launch the first search in China. There's potentially some in Indonesia. So with a real focus on Asia Pacific.
Awesome. That's cool. Have any of them made acquisitions yet?
Yeah, so we've had quite a few this year, actually. So in Australia, the first search was launched in 2019. Alex made his acquisition, I think, in 2022, early 22. The next search was launched by a guy called Rob, and he made his acquisition slightly before Alex, just in 2021. I backed Rob. I was late to the party on Alex. I backed Rob in his search phase, followed on into his acquisition 2021. And so that was really the first one. And then there was one or two more through 2022. But then this calendar year, there's already been 5 acquisitions in the search fund space in Australia/New Zealand, which is huge growth. And so, yeah, 5 out of my 10 have made their way through to completion of an acquisition.
So let's stop for just a second. For those of you who are listening and maybe you're just getting into this space, a search fund is just a different way of buying companies. It was born out of the Ivy Leagues. It started at Harvard. I think I'm pretty sure the second one was done at Stanford. And what it pretty much is exactly what it sounds like. It's a funded search. In the traditional original sense, it was funded by alumni and people in the college and the investors they knew, and the Ivies they would stick together. So, the Harvard professors would know investors that would be interested. They would take their key students, and the students would do a project and wanna raise money, and, they would fund the search, meaning they might if it's a single person, they may raise, so much to live on for the first 2 or 3 years of the search, and then those investors who funded the search also had first right of refusal to the acquisition, so they could invest and buy in the actual company. So that catches everybody up. If you don't know what a search fund is, it still has a lot of the parameters of raising a fund, like a small equity fund. In the United States, you still have to do a private placement memorandum. There's still some documentation you legally need to do, but that's what we're talking about here. What Pete's doing right now is brilliant in the fact he's taken that out of the Ivies. In the last probably 8 to 10 years, I think they started in the '70s, don't quote me, but late '70s, early '80s maybe. They it was traditionally Ivies in top schools. In the last 10 years, it's become more popular, and now you're taking it to areas probably in 2019 might have been the first one they've ever seen in Australia. It might have been the first, do it. And it was typically MBA students that were coming out of MBA programs and doing the searches. Now it could be a good operator, it could be anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good point to make. The structure and the clarity of that structure coming out of those Ivy League schools and having the history of decades of experience of going through that structure and implementing it means that the structure itself, what I typically refer to as the vanilla structure of search, is a really well trodden path. And that's a really nice thing to fall back on in terms of thinking about opportunities. But it doesn't mean that you need to necessarily stick with vanilla. And I often say to people, if vanilla doesn't work for you, there's ways in which you can add features to it and might suit you better. Now, that will change the scope and market of your potential investor base, because there are people out there that just want to invest in vanilla, but equally there are people out there that are interested in investing in other structures as well. I think definitely in Australia, there's still, and I don't, I'm trying to think through all the searches we've got in this marketplace already and their education backgrounds. I'm pretty sure we're still 100% MBA grads. Doesn't mean they've come from the Harvard, Stanford, ISE schools, but I think they're all still 100% MBA grads. But one thing that I have seen happen more often, which I'm excited about, frankly, is that non-MBA people are coming to the market and thinking about doing a search, or even just ETA. So like entrepreneurship through acquisition is the universe, right, of this activity, of which search funds is just one part. But I've been contacted by people in the last 12 or 24 months. It might be a guy who is a plumber, for example, and he is in his late 30s and he grew up on the tools and then has grown his own business to a certain size, has experience as a general manager in his own business, plus leading teams in that blue collar space. But now is kind of thinking to himself, well, imagine if I actually had a company that was bigger than this. Like, I've got an experience in working with these types of customers and these types of employees. Like, what would it look like for me to actually just take it a step up? And someone like that absolutely doesn't have finance education, doesn't have MBA, doesn't have any of those things. But one thing that he does have that a lot of other people don't is practical experience running businesses of that type and dealing with those stakeholders. So the thing for me that I like about the breadth of people that might come to it is that it opens up more and more opportunities for the model to be deployed into different areas of the marketplace. And I think that's really, really exciting. And the last point I'll make on that front would be inherent in the model is the fact that you're supported by the investor group. And so if there are holes in their experience or capability, those holes are there to be filled by the investors and to coach them to learn those holes over the journey. In exactly the same way as an MBA student has never led a team of 15 plumbing technicians, right? And so they need people around them that can help them learn. So equally, you could go through the process of educating yourself on other sides.
Yeah, one of the things I learned, we're doing this now. I've interviewed one search fund investor out of Europe, and then one of the guys, David Dotson from Stanford University, who invests in search funds now. And one of the things I learned that I didn't know beforehand is I always heard that the search takes between 18 and 36 months, but I didn't realize it was engineered that way. Most of the search fund investors, they don't want this, they're not actually looking for somebody that's gonna get a business in the first 3 weeks that they decide to fund the kid out of college. There's some lessons to learn along the path, right? There's some thickness of skin of getting told no and stuff that needs to be developed develop somebody into a leader that may or may not have that skill. Not every MBA is a kid right out of college. I didn't do my MBA until I'd been running businesses for all. I went back to college because I was like, I could probably use this. I did my MBA in my 30s. That said,
That's the other thing we're seeing a lot more now as well, which I really like is frankly more experience and older people thinking about doing a search. I've spoken to people recently that are in their 40s that are thinking, you know what, this could be a good pathway for me. And I see that it absolutely could be. I mean, one of the risks that I would probably say would be in the textbook for that would be, is someone in their 40s open to continue to learn? Can you teach an old dog new tricks? And because you definitely need to learn new tricks if you're going to take this journey. But as long as you can satisfy that requirement, then absolutely you bring a whole wealth of experience to the market as well. And so my starting point is always start as broad as possible in terms of the opportunity, because then we're going to encourage like the broadest range of deals and businesses and transactions and journeys as we can.
So what does the approach look like? How does somebody, yeah, whether an MBA program or I think, like you said, it's pretty much still the MBA program in Australia. It's probably in the high percentage of that here too. So I wouldn't say 100%, but probably I would be surprised if it was below 75% of the people doing search funds don't have an MBA.
Yeah.
Or the 25% don't. I would imagine it's at least higher than that. That's me. That's a swag, scientific wild
Yeah.
guess. That said, what is the process? If I'm near graduation, I think entrepreneurship's my route, and I think I'm gonna do the search fund. What is the conversation I need to start having in my head and the prep work I need to start doing paperwork wise and stuff to have something worth presenting to a guy like you?
So I think for me, there is a, let's call it a journey.
Mhm.
Sometimes I get overused, and so tell me if I overuse it. But there is a journey that you need to traverse in that thought process, and I see it happen in real time with almost everyone I speak to that's considering it as a path, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of that journey is best served by having as many conversation as you can, because it's the thing about ETA or search funds or becoming a searcher or even regardless of all of those terms, becoming a business owner. It's very much more than I would say any other career path. It's very much a life decision. And so given that it's a life decision, you need to have a lot of self-awareness around what it is that you're trying to achieve for yourself as a result of going along that journey. This isn't like, oh, I might take a job here for 3 years and then that'll help to build my CV for the next job that I'll take for 3 years. And, it's not a career path thing where there probably is more optionality, regardless of which decision you make incrementally along the way. You really do need to be ready to go all in, and you need to be ready for that journey to be long. And so I think it's always worthwhile soaking in it for a while and doing that in partnership with as many people in the network as you can. So speaking to other entrepreneurs that are halfway through their search, other entrepreneurs that are halfway through their ownership journey, a whole range of investors to get various perspectives, even going and meeting with business owners, not people that are necessarily looking at selling, but trying to work out how you could even just shadow someone for a period of time to learn what does a day in the life look like what's it going to look like for me. I think that reality is really, really important because you need to make sure that it's going to fit for you. There's a whole bunch of other things that you can learn. Like there's a whole bunch of technical stuff you can learn. You can whole bunch of books you can read. There's documents from Stanford. There's whole primers of stuff online that you can soak up and educate yourself. But I think for me, the most important thing is really sitting back and reflecting on whether or not that journey is going to be something that suits you, because it's not easy, but that doesn't make it bad. It just means that when it's not easy, you need to be comfortable it's the kind of not easy that you're going to enjoy. so, so I think for me, starting point has got to be that self-awareness piece and getting as much exposure to as many different perspectives as you can to confirm, yes, like that's absolutely the journey I want to go on. Now, the next step after that is, okay, what can I learn? And there's heaps of stuff. Stanford in particular puts out a whole primer of documents that gives you everything you could possibly want to learn technically about it. And then after you've been through that layer, that the great thing about the marketplace, and I'm happy that in the Australian and in the Asian market, our community has followed the same path as what it seems to have followed in the US and Europe in its growth. And it's one that's very open. There's an abundance mindset in the community, right? So everyone's very happy to talk, happy to share, happy to help educate. If there's a new searcher that's coming to the market, or even frankly, a new investor, it doesn't take long for them to navigate their way through that network and have conversations with multiple people who are very open and transparent and helping them to get their head around the process. So yeah, in summary, I'd say step one is trying to absorb and expose yourself to as many parameters of that market as possible to determine that it is actually something that you want to do.
I didn't stumble across those set of Stanford documents until I'd probably interviewed I'd probably paid 10 or 15,000, $20,000 worth of mentorships and interviewed about 150 or 160 of you guys, and then I started Googling it and I found it, and I was like, "Wow, that it's really in depth." I'll put it
Mm,
in the show notes for this show. I'll
mm.
include that, so I'll put a note in there that we'll include the link because it's buried there a little bit under some stuff.
It is, yeah.
But, for an email address exchange and all, I think there's a little survey you gotta fill out, like 5 questions or something, 10 questions. It is in depth and it's very educational. Even though I'm not doing a search fund, there's stuff I'm those attorney Stanford attorneys drew up all the legal contracts you need to do a search fund in
Yeah,
that document. There's example I think there's even example private placement memorandum.
yeah,
Everything you would need is in there. So,
yeah,
there's stuff I pulled out of there and like, "Okay, hey, next time I do a contract or something, I'm gonna have my attorney put
yeah.
this is a great clause," I did
Letters of offer and yeah,
yeah,
all that stuff. I mean, so there's no, and that's why I guess what I say is there's no shortage on the information side. Like if you're
yeah,
trying to learn about it, that frankly is relatively easy.
yeah,
The harder bit is deciding to do it. All right.
right,
And that's why I think it's such an internal thing around, is this something that's going to fit me? And can I find my people? I think something that I spend a lot of time speaking to searchers about in particular, particularly when they're doing their cap raise, is that they'll be speaking to investors trying to raise capital. And the feedback that I give to them is it's as much about them finding their people as it is about them finding the capital. And
right.
so there will be investors that they just don't fit with, and that's okay. Just keep moving until you find the investor that you do fit with, because the investor group globally, definitely, but even in particular markets, is quite diverse. And so there'll be some people that you just, for whatever reason, it doesn't fit. You need to find your people.
I've found myself I've always been pretty good at raising capital for the real estate world and even for this space. And, the rule of thumb I've always used, and I'll share it right here so everybody that's thinking, when you need money, ask for advice, and when you need advice, ask for money.
Mm,
If you go to somebody and go, "Hey, I really need a lot of your time. I need help mentoring me through this. Here's what I've got going on," and you really show what you know, a lot of times, like, "Hey, I don't have the time to mentor you, but when you're ready, I'll fund it for you. I'll
mm,
help you do it." They'll actually because 'cause they'll believe in you. And then when you need money, like, "Hey, I really need an investor for this. I need this." And then a lot of times the pushback is, "Well, I can't do that, but I have time."
mm.
It's an interesting concept. It's worked in the real estate space and it's been working in this space. So,
Well, I think it
um,
resonates. It resonates in the search space because search investors. One of the reasons that people should be coming to the search space as an investor is because they want to deploy more than just their money. They
yeah.
want to deploy that advice piece as well, and so that approach definitely should resonate there.
So we talked about where to find the information. Stanford has a great resource. There's I've done a bunch of interviews. There's a bunch of other podcasters and their content's out there. You can go to what I refer to as YouTube University. You can crawl through YouTube, find what you need to find, learn. You can crawl through Stanford's docs and do that. You can learn what you need to learn. Where do they find their people? Where do they not the investor side? We'll talk about that. That's the next phase. But right now, you did say network of people are already doing it. People are already in the middle of the search. I know a few resources, but from your perspective, where do you tell people to go meet others in this space and others on this journey? What do you suggest?
So I think my suggestion would be it's different for each market. Like I think if you think virtually and you think globally, there are things like searchfunder.com is
Yep.
a website that's quite a big network. I'm not super active on that platform, but I know that other people have found it very, very useful from a searcher point of view. And I think that connects you globally quite well. I think if you keep an eye on kind of traffic on LinkedIn around things like the conferences, so Harvard, Stanford, ISC, Chicago Boost, like you name it, they've all got conferences that are happening around the world. And if you keep an eye on the traffic around that, you can identify the particular individuals that are at the hub of that spoke of network, if that makes sense. And so I think virtually you can kind of navigate that quite quickly. I think then when you get locally and you want to get the face to face stuff, which obviously, as we all know, is super valuable and much deeper when you get that face to face connection. It depends on the market. So in North America, again, I haven't been there with my feet on the ground for a few years, but my sense is that there are lots of small pockets, depending on where you happen to live, lots of small pockets of small groups of people that are getting together on a regular basis to talk about search or self-funded search or entrepreneurship through acquisition or whatever, right? Like there are lots of those little communities out there. From an Asian perspective, that's what we've been trying to do with the ETA forum, which last year we had our first event, 2022. And that was the first time really in this time zone, I guess, there was any kind of physical event that brought together people in the ETA or search fund community. And to be honest, when I set it up about 18 months ago, I literally thought it was going to be like 30 people at a long lunch at a local pub, right? Like that's what I set out to achieve. But by the end of it, we had 150 and we booked out the rooftop. So that was quite encouraging. But we did it again this year and we attracted over 200 people this year, just last month or a month ago, 2 months ago. But again, that provides a good kind of face to face network. But then even if I think about even in the Australian market, there are then smaller pockets of people. Like there's a crew in Melbourne, there's a crew in Brisbane, there's a crew in Sydney, and they've got their own ways of kind of staying in touch. And so you end up with kind of these overlapping networks that are really, really useful. Like, but specific example, I got a guy reached out to me 2 weeks ago, brand new to the market, just thinking about doing some sort of ETA or search, based in Melbourne. I had a 15-minute chat with him online. And then I said, yeah, look, sounds like something you should definitely learn more about. Let me connect you with the Melbourne crew. And so I just wrote an email with like 5 names on it. And then within 15 minutes, he was connected to another 20 people that are all active down locally with him. And then by coincidence, I'm down there next week and they're actually having one of their catch ups next Monday afternoon. So like relatively quickly, because I think it goes to the heart of the community nature, which seems again, like it's something that I think, I don't know whether it's inherent in the model, inherent in the volume of the marketplace, but every single market, like, and I've spoken to people from Brazil, from Spain, from Germany to UK, wherever, Canada, every marketplace is so open and transparent that the network effect happens very, very quickly. It's like a grass fire. Like, as soon as you introduce yourself into it, if you do the right things, very, very quickly, you'll be introduced to a range of other people. It doesn't really take that long.
It's interesting. You guys come up with cooler names. Like we do meetups and you guys do catch ups. Now we know how to meet people in the industry, right? We know how to find others doing what we're wanting to do. And that's a brilliant thing to do. I always joke, I picked this up from a friend of mine. He's never seen a phone number he was afraid to dial. So I'll call somebody. I'll reach out to, I mean, we've been trying to reach out to people like Shaquille O'Neal and stuff for this show. Like we just send him a message. I've been publicly calling him out on Twitter. He hasn't responded yet, but eventually I'll get him on here.
It'll
A
happen.
lot of people don't understand he owns over 400 businesses. But, you know, being able to reach out to people and connect with them and learn from them. I initially, if you'd asked me 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I'm getting older now, if that was a good way to do things, I say, "Well, people are too busy. They won't want to help you." And I've learned the exact opposite.
Mm,
Successful people wanna help other people succeed. If you show ambition,
yeah.
especially the younger guys, when a young guy calls you and he's got young and ambition, man, people wanna help that. But they still, if you show true, honest, earnest, like, "I'm trying to solve something and I'd like to like your help," people are wired to help each other, more so than you would ever imagine.
Mm. I agree. I agree. And I think also, like, one of the things that the person should be looking for
Mhm.
is they should be trying to network themselves with helpful people. So it almost self-selects, right? If you reach out to 10 people and 7 of them don't respond, like, okay, well, they're not the helpful people that I want to be networking with anyway, right? Like,
Right.
so you kind of end up finding the right people because they are the people that respond. They are the people that offer their time. Like, so you're finding your way through the network in the right way.
And I think it's just like anything else. A lot of people, they think it's all about the numbers. They think investors they wanna pitch an investor return on investment. And I think in any investor in any space, especially in the ETA space, I think it's better off to sit down with somebody and go, "What do you get out of this? What is it you're trying to accomplish?" Because a lot of times the investors, they're set. They're really not trying to get 8 points, right? They're
Mm,
or 8% or 10% or double their money. If you really look at and try to just really get at the heart what they're trying to achieve, you'll know whether you're in alignment with them or not,
y-
right? A lot
Yeah.
of times you'll find out, just because somebody says, "I wanna give back and I wanna help," and that's the answer of a lot of these investors. I wanna give back, I wanna help, I wanna see people succeed. Doesn't mean you're gonna get your money because 'cause they're still logical, they're still smart, they're gonna make smart bets. You still have to be a smart bet, but if you head into it with a pitch and you don't really know what they're trying to accomplish, I think you're pitching the wrong. You're standing there on the mound facing the second base and throwing the ball, and the batter's at the other end. You don't know where you're throwing. So,
Yeah.
and so many people approach it that way in business. Same way as a business owner. You get them on the phone and everybody's like, "Well, how much you want for your business?"
Yeah.
That's the wrong, in my mind, that's the wrong question. First
Yeah.
question is, where are you trying to get to? I kinda joke, I've got a different sense of humor than most, so I can pull off things and a lot of people can't. One of my favorite things is, like, out of all the things you could be doing in the day, what has you on the phone with an investor looking to buy businesses? What has you talking to me today?
I agree. And I, like one of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about and frankly also talking about with my co-investors is this concept of owner's mission, which is why we actually here. And obviously one of those factors is financial,
Oh,
right? So
definitely. Yeah.
like, and the returns in search are, they have historically been fantastic. So, like the returns are good. And as you say, if there's a deal that's coming up, people aren't going to ignore the financials. They're an element. But I also think that definitely part of the mission from an investor's perspective in the search space is to help create more business owners and to help nurture upcoming CEOs. And so that is always going to be a factor. And so that's where, if people ask me, what are the attributes I'm looking for in a searcher that I might back?
Mhm.
The things that I jump to first are things like grit and perseverance and coachability and those attributes. Like, sure, you need to know how to add up and you need to know how to write a sentence and you need to know how to, but if you assume that you've got like a reasonable level of those technical aspects, it's these other things. Do you know how to deal with people? Can you build rapport? Like it's those aspects that are going to be really important, and the ability for the investor group to help coach those searches through that process.
Do you find that there's certain backgrounds that really lend to being great search somebody a great person to back in a search? I'll give you an example. In the sales realm, if I'm ready to hire a sales guy, here in the United States, we still have door-to-door salesmen. You probably do the same thing. There's a couple companies out there, and that's a tough gig, man. Canvassing door to door and selling something, especially something expensive, tough gig. If I'm looking for a sales guy and somebody tells me they're a Cutco salesman, which sells in fancy knives, or Rainbow Vacs, something, expensive multi-thousand-dollar vacuum systems, first thing I say is like, "Cool, how long did you last?" "Lasted more than 2 years?" "Cool. What was your highest salary point?" If they're
Mm.
making serious money, I'm interested because they know how to sell. That's a tough sell. They know they have the grit to stick with something. It's not easy, and if they're making money doing that, they can probably sell anything. Is there, like, a something that shows you a background or a something out there that shows you, like, this person's probably gonna be pretty good at this?
So if I go first to that grit concept, there are a few backgrounds that I think resonate well in there. And there are a couple of people swimming on the fringes in this kind of with this background. But I think high performance sport, I think is an interesting background. Someone that is willing to put in the work to wake up every day and put their body through hell and their mind through hell, frankly, to get to that high level of performance sport. I think that shows the level of grit and determination. It also demonstrates coachability because you can't
Mhm.
get a level without taking instruction. So I think high performance sport is good. I think a military background is an interesting one. And there are a couple of searches here. One of the searches that I've just invested in an acquisition with is from a military background. And I think that there are a few attributes there. There's obviously grit. I think there's also really good in terms of teamwork and discipline. So I think that those attributes are really, really good. I think that there are some edges of the military background that you probably need to polish off in order to kind of resonate in a small business environment. But I think that there are some fundamentals there that are really useful. I also think that that background of dealing with things in a first-hand basis and kind of seeing problems and be willing to face them kind of front on are really useful. And you can even look to family backgrounds for that, not necessarily even experiences. So there are other searches that I'm backing that maybe their career has been more of a normal professional career, but their parents were small business owners. So they grew up like sitting in the warehouse or waiting for mum and dad to finish work at midday on a Saturday because they had to go in and, like they've kind of been born into understanding what that looks and feels like. It's not foreign to them. So I think having business ownership in your family is really interesting. And the other one that I'm seeing a few times actually is people that have come through, whether it's them or their parents from a farming background, like agricultural, like living on the land type background, where you just have to get stuff done, right? Stuff
Yep.
breaks and you just have to fix it. And like, you can't like just go back to your office and like design a plan. You've got to get out and fix it. You got to put boots on and fix it. So I think those are the things that I think show really interesting backgrounds. All of it basically all coming back to this grit and perseverance and this ability to say, you know what, when something goes wrong, like I'm going to be there to, we'll work out a way of fixing it. In New Zealand, they've got a really cool saying called number eight wire. So number eight wire is a particular gauge of wire that you get on a spool. And there's this kind of general, it's almost cultural in New Zealand where you can always fix anything with number eight wire. People use that concept when they're even sitting in business meetings or board meetings or whatever. Like they use the phrase like, what's the number eight approach to this? Like, how do we just deal with it right now and fix it as best as we can? And you need a lot of that with small business, I think.
It's funny is we use a lot of parallel things here. Here it's baling wire, like so the bale wire that goes
Yeah.
around. We now they use rope and stuff, but when I grew up, it was a thick wire that went around the bales of hay. Anyway, prior military, right? Grew up on a farm, little pecan grove in the middle of Oklahoma. We grew most of our own food. Hard work, I still wake up at the at daybreak because if the sun's up, I'm supposed to be working. Anyway, you check off all that stuff, and I think about all the entrepreneurs I know. In my mind, I think some of the ones I would say the same, instead of, not just competitive sports, and I wouldn't say any black belt, like jujitsu, right? Something that's highly technical, hard to get a black belt in.
Mm.
Somebody tells me they're a black belt in jujitsu, I know they've got grit. I
Mm.
know they're good at technical, like logical thinking and thinking under pressure, right? Because
Mm.
a lot of times you're thinking and you're getting choked out.
Mm.
Um, so
And they've got a learning mindset,
they
right?
got, yeah.
They're constantly thinking about themselves as a student, and they're always ready to hear from someone else to say, actually, have you tried this? Or have you thought about this? Or how you might improve here or whatever like that. They're actually hungry for that. And I think that that's super powerful. It's one thing that even it's a transition also that you see when a searcher goes from the search phase to the post acquisition phase, like they
Mhm.
sit into the CEO seat for the first time. It's something that requires, it takes some time for them to then get comfortable with the fact that, yes, I am sitting in the CEO seat, but I still need to stay vulnerable. I still need to keep a learning mindset. I don't know all the answers and I need to be ready to ask for help.
There's one I'm starting to develop a liking towards as far as operators, and, at first I would 4 or 5 years ago, I'd say, "Eh," but now I'm really looking into it because and it's high level gamers, people who game, even the video gamers, but they do competitive, and the reason is because they learn the rules and bounds with inside of those games, especially the ones that play on team sports. I'm watching my son get better and better at this. They form teams and they go and do missions and stuff and they win them. And the way they have to work together and they learn the rules of that individual game and how to gamify and the
Yep.
cheat codes and everything, that's the
Yep.
same thing as business. If you take a lot of those same skills, like, okay, here's the rules and laws we have to fall within, and how do we win in this situation with all these dynamics happening? The
Yep.
same wires in your brain that have to fire. I think there's a lot of parallelism,
Yeah.
parallel.
And like you said, the teamwork is huge there. And that's another really good lead indicator is that ability to kind of build and grow teams
Mm,
is so important. Because usually if you look at most of the businesses that a search fund would buy, it's hit one of the team thresholds. So you've got a business and the founder grew it and started it 15 years ago. They've owned it 15 years and grown it to a certain size. The size they've probably grown it to is a team limit that they can't crack through, right?
yeah.
It'll be like 15 people because to get to 25, they need to start delegating, right? Or it'll be like 30 people because they've got one really good lieutenant, but they can't trust anyone else. Or like, so usually the breakthrough moment that they need to achieve in the next kind of 5 years of ownership it has got a lot to do with team. And so the ability to work out how do I build a team and how do I build a good, strong, functioning, productive team is a big part of the process.
It's funny as I used to joke around and say the reason because I made it all the way up to senior director level, and I was like, "Oh, yeah," in the tech industry before I got burned out in there. And at one point, I think I had a division of like 100 and something employees. The funny thing was, the memory that you just clicked is when I moved from having a team of 7, and the next one I had 3 teams, and I had like 29, 30. It was a different thing. And I joked, everybody said, you did really well." I was like, yeah, I had 2 things. I had a mentor, and I work my butt off, but I'm inherently lazy in the fact that I don't wanna do the same thing over and over again, so I love to delegate. I wanna
Mm.
solve the problem once, I wanna teach you how to do the problem, I wanna go look for the next problem. while it's unique, it makes me a horrible day-to-day operator, but it makes me a great visionary in a dynamic where everything's changing, like an IT department and stuff like that. It makes, especially one that's having outages and issues,
Mm,
I excelled in that world, right? There's I don't know what the word how do I wanna put this? There's a saying or a belief out there that entrepreneurs aren't made, they're born, and I don't think that's necessarily true. I
yeah.
think that you can engineer an entrepreneur basically, their life conditions that they've been through can do it, or you can develop that. You just kinda need to know what traits to look for. You can take somebody that's prior military or somebody that's in a performance game in gaming or performance sports, and, maybe they have never been an entrepreneur, but you know they've got all the other elements, right?
Mm.
The gamification, the solving problems on the fly, the teamwork, all the little elements, handling stressful situations, right?
And I think a lot of that is also humility. I think the ability to acknowledge the fact that you don't have all the answers and you will trip over, and that's okay. And other people will see you trip over. And when that happens, it's okay to reach out and ask for help. And like that process, I think a lot of people underestimate. I think they come into it thinking if people are going to back me to be the entrepreneur and be the CEO of this business, I better be bulletproof because that's the only way they're going to trust me. Whereas I don't think that's the case at all. I think that what you're looking for is someone that can keep getting back up again and keep kind of striving forward and solve the next problem and keep improving along the way. Absolutely. Like you don't want them tripping over the same hurdle 100 times, but it's not the tripping that's the problem. It's the ability to then learn from that and get back up and do it again.
You just triggered a realism or a realization is the word I should look for. I was reading for an article I'm working on, I was reading a US Bureau of Labor Statistics show, the 2 different looking at 2 different statistic sets. Only 9% or 9 in 100 businesses ever started in the United States ever hit the $1,000,000 mark. 75% fell within the first 15 years. So you've got a 75% chance of failure and a 9% chance of ever crossing the $1,000,000 mark ever, if you
Mm,
start a business in the United States. Then I look at SBA loans and their failure rates, and it's almost the exact opposite.
mm,
Only in the worst year during 2000, I looked at the last 15 years on this report. In the worst year, we had a 24.7% failure rate, default rate on a 10-year default rate on SBA 7A loans, basically buying a business in its worst year. And I think the realization I just had is because you're starting something, you're picking the team, and you're doing it on your own, and you're solving the problem. When you buy something, you've got a performance team, you're stepping in. So
mm,
it's like getting like for the team aspect, I'm not in the sports at all, but it'd be the difference between, okay, yeah, I'm a coach, I gotta pick our school's never had a football team ever, and I'm gonna pick, 15, 20 people in here, we're gonna create a football team. Let's just say it's not Dallas Cowboys because my dad was always a fan, I don't ever remember them winning, so we'll use the Dallas Cowboys. You then say they're the best in the world and getting drafted onto that team and getting to play. You're surrounded by greatness, and you're gonna step up to the level around you. I think when you acquire businesses, you're acquiring something that's working, has a track record and everything else, you're surrounded by good people, and as long as you don't do the egotistical thing and try to change everything right away, you got a pretty good shot at learning from the people around you, and especially if you've got advisors and board members that are investors and you got people above you that have done it before.
yeah.
S Man, that I would like to see, and I don't know where to get the statistics, but I'd like to see the statistics of successful funded searches. I
Mm,
bet it's I bet it's better than the 70 something percent in our worst year, the SBA loans.
yeah.
I'd probably say it's in the 80s and 90s%.
I think it is. So Stanford, again, thanks to Stanford, they do a report every 2 years, and they've got the tree on that. So I can't, to be honest, I can't remember as we sit here exactly what those numbers are, but definitely by the time you get to acquisition, if the statistic that you're talking about is the difference between failure and not failure, then the number is really, really low in terms of failure. If you then say, well, what about just getting your money back as opposed to hitting your target returns? Then there's a proportion where you just get your money back. Like it didn't go great, but you didn't lose money. But then there's like a large majority, which is actually you're hitting the kind of returns that you want to be hitting. So yeah, once you've made that acquisition, the likelihood that actually things are going to go terribly wrong is very, very low. And I think that's all of those things. I think it is that you've already got some momentum in the business that you're buying, even though there might be things, well, there definitely will be things that you'll need to change to take it to the next level. But yeah, then you also have like a support network around you, which should be trying to make sure that they put enough guardrails around you that you don't kind of step too far from a good path.
Yeah, in that same report I was looking on the SBA loans, if you've just read it, all we would be looking for were breweries because during that time frame, the last 10 or 15 years, only like 2 point something percent of breweries ever defaulted on their loans. So everybody else is 18, 20. There's a bunch, but if you look at the top 20 that succeeded,
Yeah.
breweries are number one.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't drink that much beer. If I actually, I'd have to if I hadn't owned a brewery because you got to like test the product, right? I don't know. That maybe that's an avenue, do a roll up of microbrews and have like kind of a microbrew brand.
Well, and I think this is something I spend a lot of time thinking about around the market as a whole.
Mhm.
So, I feel like if at the core of what I do is I try and find entrepreneurs I can invest in to then go and buy businesses, one pathway is I can just see what comes up and then look to invest in them. But actually, what I enjoy doing, and also what I think is an attribute of the community, is that I'm also pretty active in trying to work out how to build all the various elements. So, like, I spend a lot of time speaking to banks about how to improve the way in which they lend, and speaking to investors to try and help them understand exactly what this opportunity is like. So, if it suits them, then we can encourage more investors to the market. Speak to entrepreneurs who I'm not backing so that I can help them be successful. Because that then, like, the flywheel effect of that is that we end up in a situation where we're building a vibrant marketplace as a whole, into which then I can play, obviously. And exactly as you say, there's various layers of this process. Who's going to be the eventual buyer? Who are the sellers that are going to come around in the next 5 or 10 years? Who are the entrepreneurs that are going to run it? What's the debt and equity situation? And how do we make sure we're nurturing that in the right way? I think all of those pieces of the puzzle are important for us to try and make sure we're developing.
What is the timeline for your search fund? When you do the acquisition and you take a position in the acquisition, you're one of the investors in the acquired business.
Yep.
Usually anything that's private equity actually has a timeline, meaning and most investors wanna know the 3 questions, like, "Is my money safe? When do I get my money back? And what am I gonna earn on my money?" Right? And usually in
Yep.
that order, they wanna know it's safe. Do I believe in you and you're not gonna destroy this business? How do I get it back? When do I get it back? And then, okay, how much am I gonna earn? Usually it's in that order, at least the people I've talked to.
Y-
What is that timeline, for you? Is there a
Yeah. So the first response to that typically would be 5 to 10 years is the normal kind of hold period range.
Mhm.
And most kind of shareholder documents, that the shareholder agreement or whatever that goes behind the vehicles, will have something in there that says a general intention to exit within 5 to 10 years after acquisition of the business. The statistics say that the average hold period over the last 10 to 20 years of search funds that have cycled in and out is between 5 and 6 years. So it's at the shorter end of that spectrum. I'm already seeing a little bit in this region the fact that you could hit the kind of target hurdles quite easily within that time frame. So there is like an opportunity to exit then and still, tick all the boxes. So it's really then a question of whether or not I think it probably ends up being two windows.
Mhm.
Like, you either go at it pretty hard and you get out in about the 5 year frame, or you go at it hard to fix things. And then you realize that actually, you know what, this could be a great cash flow business. Let's hold it for 10 instead of five. Ultimately, post acquisition, it's a privately held business like any other with a group of shareholders that have voting rights, right? So you can kind of make those decisions on the fly. The only slightly limiting or kind of consideration that you need to take into account is that the searcher themselves has a proportion of their carry tied up in the exit. And so there is an incentive, appropriately so, that based on performance of that exit, they will be incentivized to get an exit. If you were going to be making a decision as a group of shareholders to hold for much longer than a normal targeted exit timeframe, you'd want to make sure you navigate a reasonable conversation with the searcher around how you make good on that. But yeah, in very normal terms, I would expect most search funds exit between 5 and 8 years, really.
Okay. So that's it's interesting because I've seen on the regular private equity, I've seen everything from 3 to 5 to 10, right? 10 is the long term. And one of the reasons I haven't done a private placement memorandum and raised money to do an acquisition in that way, I've come up with creative ways to do it differently. But the reason I'm not going down that path is what if you really got, when I'm looking for something, I'm looking for something that's really interesting to keep. What at the end of that, it's time to produce liquidity for those investors, but this thing's it's a cash cow. It's fun to run. It's self-sufficient. It's running. I've met and I've actually had people pitch to me selling companies like, "Why are you selling this?" "Well, I raised money to buy it, and I have to, commit to that. I've committed to the sale."
So
Right?
yeah, so I reckon there's a range of options there, but to kind of hone in on kind of one of those, there's definitely an opportunity if you were the searcher at that point.
Mhm.
There's definitely an opportunity to negotiate a situation where you go and raise capital from a new group of investors. That might even include some of the existing investors that want to follow on, and you raise that capital at the exit valuation and you roll your stock, right? Because
Yep,
you want to stay involved, you still want to be the CEO, all that sort of stuff. And you roll your stock with your incentive as well. New investor group comes in, they're there for the next phase of the journey, which goes right back to that conversation we had at the beginning of our owner's mission, right? You've got a new set of investors that are there for a different mission. They're there for yield, they're there for cash flow, dividends, that kind of thing. Whereas the initial investors were there probably more for capital growth and that kind of thing. So it's just a matter of navigating that situation where you say, well, I need a new investor group because we're going on a new part of this journey.
that's really cool too, though. If you look at the journey of all this, I wanna see where the word I'm looking for is what does this look like in 40 years from now, 50 years from now, right? I think it's gonna change the landscape, and it needs to. We have so many businesses right now that the market and right now even and in the future, there's more businesses out there that, for sale than that can be sold. Not all of them are good. Yeah, there's a lot of people say, "Well, that's just because there's not a lot of good businesses out there." There are a lot of good business out there. A lot of them never even hit the market, and the way they hit the market is the word gets out that there's buyers for it and there's value in it, and that it's not a nightmare to do. A lot of these guys, if you think of somebody under 40 when they want to sell their business, somebody under 40 selling their business is usually selling it because they have either another bright idea or they've got to the point where, like, "I've taken this as far as I can take it. I don't know how to take it anymore." They've hit one of
Yep.
those milestones where they need to go
Yep.
from caterpillar to butterfly, and they don't know how to build a cocoon. So they're gonna sell it and do something else. Uh, the other side of it is you got you guys that are in their 70s and they're not wanting to sell it because like, "This is all I know. I don't know how to do anything else, and selling it's gonna be a real pain in my butt."
Yeah. And that's why one of the things that's on my radar, probably next calendar year, to do more of in this market, because it's one that I can be more active in, is do as much as I can on the seller side of the equation. Like, how do we get this concept into the minds of business owners at various
Yep,
stages so that they know that it's another one of the potential levers that they can pull. I mean, they all know that they could sell to a competitor. They all know that they could potentially pass it on to their kids. They all know that they could sell to private equity. They know what that looks like and all that kind of thing. But I feel like this is another option in their kit bags that if they knew about it, it would give them just another perspective on what that exit might look like. And I think that would also kind of grease the wheels for the transactions and the engagements that searchers have. Like, definitely at the moment, if a searcher's operating in Australia and they reach out to a business owner and say, "Hey, if you thought about selling your business," and they say, "I'm a searcher," the business owner would say, "That's nice, but I don't know what you're looking for." But I imagine a time when you get to the place where they say, "I'm a searcher," and the business owner more often than not might say, "Oh, okay, I get that. You're backed by some investors. You're going to drop in and run it. Like, that gives me a legacy." Like, they get all
yeah.
this. So
It should mean I've got the education, I've got the mentors, and I got the backing, but it doesn't quite yet,
yeah.
and that's an expensive thing. One of the things I tell people at times, especially as a small business owner, the most expensive thing you can do is change the perception and the mind of the consumer.
Mm,
So, it's an expensive adventure. It's either and it costs one of 2 things, time or money. So, right now, you're investing the time and some money because 'cause you're traveling and speaking in front of groups, but you're putting the time in. You can either run a $50 million marketing campaign and put it on the radio every night and every channel, TV, radio, internet is,
mm,
right? But that's a tough gig to have, and a lot of entrepreneurs try to take that on. Like, "I'm gonna be the egg for people who like oranges." It's like, "My eggs taste like oranges," and, like, the toughest thing you can do in a market, and I'm a marketing nerd, is to change the perception in the average person's mind. It's a tough gig to do. You can
mm,
create a category of one easier. Yeah, that's a very profitable thing to do sometimes. Like, we're like this, but we're like X but Y, and you
mm,
create an individual that you're so individual that you just don't fit in any category. So you're not trying to shift a perception. It's
mm,
kind of like the guys that said bacon for breakfast before they did the marketing campaign for bacon for breakfast. It was a lunch and dinner thing. They introduced something to a category. They didn't change the concept. There was
yes.
nobody out there saying bacon's bad. Don't eat bacon for breakfast. And that's what
Yeah.
people try to do all the time is that they try to change, you're doing that wrong. You should do this. And that's a tough gig to play.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I agree, and that's why I like. And it's the same. We were talking earlier about different approaches to search funds and different
mhm,
structures and all that kind of stuff. I generally take the approach of if you don't have to be prescriptive about the pathway, then don't.
mm,
And if you can be open to what the options are for any particular person in that network, then be open. And so when it comes to the business owners, absolutely, there's a variety of ways they could exit. If we can just say to them, well, there's a fifth option or a sixth option or what different dynamic, like in terms of volume. But even in Australia, there are like over 100,000 businesses that sit within the very small band of price that would suit a search fund. Like we would have to be, it would take us 20 years to transact on those if we were doing 5,000 a year. Like the number of business owners that own businesses that are the kinds of things that searchers would buy is off the charts. So it's
yeah,
just really a matter of trying to find that small group that it might fit.
awesome. Well, we're running out of time here. Let's do a couple things. How do people reach out to you? What's the best way to reach you?
Oh, probably LinkedIn at the moment. They can find me on LinkedIn and just, yeah, drop me a message or send me a note or whatever. That's probably the easiest, I'd say.
Cool. And I'll put that link in the show notes for you guys.
Right.
And then the other one is if somebody could remember one thing from the show, maybe one or two different things, what would you want them to remember from listening to this hour?
I really think that if people are out there listening and they're on the entrepreneur side of the equation, I think that the self-awareness piece is super important to me. I think spending the time to work out whether or not this is actually a path that you want to take, because there are multiple other paths. Having a career in a corporate is a great pathway for some people. Right? So self-awareness, I think, is really important, and speaking to lots of different people to try and then reflect on what that means for you, I think is important. And probably the other thing would be I'm just a massive fan of small business acquisitions. And I think that there are large groups of entrepreneurial people in the marketplace that seem to think that the only way to be an entrepreneur is to start a business, whereas actually you can buy one instead.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you for having your time, spending the time here with me. Enjoy your sunny day in Australia, and we'll call that a show.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries, sold in M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit net.com/marketplace. How to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.